And what special welcome to our valued Dynamo clients today. We're excited to unlock the power of Dynamo version 3.0 with you today in our special webinar series that we continue to host around version 3.0. Today, you'll learn more about our intelligent interface, our flexible migration options, and even some best practices for a smooth transition to version 3.0. I'm really excited to welcome our panelists today. We have a number of experts here lined up for you, including Michelle O'Connell, Phil DeTremp, and Kelly Wilkie. And with that, we're going to get things moving quickly here because we do have a lot to cover. We do want to make sure, though, that you do submit your questions today because in the last 15 minutes or so of today's session, we will be running the live Q&A. So don't hesitate to put your questions in and we will get to as many as we possibly can live during the session, and we will follow up with anyone whose question we're not able to get to following today's session. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to Michelle.
Thanks, Donna. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone joining from various time zones. It's great to speak to you today. So just for context today, for our agenda, we'll talk about why Dynamo 3.0, also what is Dynamo 3.0, what are our migration options for existing clients, what are some best practices with migrations, and then how do you go ahead and get started. So with Dynamo 3.0, just for some context, we do have in the implementations world about 35 to 40 clients actively using 3.0 today. Most of them were new clients that came in the last 6 months or so. And some of them are live, some are very close to live, but we are really excited to push 3.0 migrations out to our broader client base. So for those of you who are new and haven't had a chance to see any of our webinars on 3.0 yet, what is Dynamo 3.0? Dynamo 3.0 is an updated, more modern, intuitive user interface. It is a user interface only. So what that means is that when you migrate to 3.0, you will see a different Dynamo interface that looks much better, is much easier to learn, much more modern, all of that good stuff. What will not change to alleviate any concerns or questions you might have is any existing data entities, data structures, those are the same. Your database isn't changing. Custom reports will work the same as well as custom workflows. So no changes there. Your add-ins such as Outlook, Excel, those are not changing either. They'll work the same way they did before. And for any of you who are using Dynamo Portal or WebVision, they will not change. Now, for those of you who are on Portal, if you recall, we've been using Dynamo Portal 3.0 for about 2 years now. So if you're still using Dynamo Portal 2.0, it might be good to think about upgrading Portal to 3.0 as well while you're thinking about planning your 3.0 UI migration. So let's get started and jump right into why Dynamo 3.0. Let me hand things over to Phil DeTremp to speak to that from our product team.
Thanks, Michelle. And if we look at kind of, why we want people to migrate to 3.0, it really comes down to about 5 things. And I know a lot of you have probably already seen demos, seen the marketing materials, talked with the team, seen the webinars, attended Dynamo University. So we'll try to keep this brief. But for those that haven't seen it, we just want to remind people why the push to this new front end. I think first and foremost, what we're seeing is having a modern interface. It's a lot faster, it's more responsive. Users are excited to log in and see the system. I think the current version of Dynamo, obviously a little outdated. This new version is certainly more welcoming to users and people get excited to log in and start using the system. The second major change here is going to be using our Dynamo blueprints, and we'll talk a lot more about this as we go through the session. But the Dynamo blueprints are basically our out-of-the-box kind of configurations and setup for each of our primary modules. And we worked, over the 25 plus years of Dynamo, working with thousands of clients, kind of really formed what we feel like is a strong kind of starting point for clients. And the blueprint will allow clients to adopt those immediately, and then also continue to see the updates to the blueprint as we make those over time. One other additional major change with 3.0 is the concept of hubs, which is a little bit similar to the workspaces in 2.0, But you can think of hubs as these kind of core landing places within the UI. They might have various tabs along so that you can access multiple information. And within those hubs, we've added embedded previews on grids. So as you're seeing the system, one of the important things is that we're greatly reducing the amount of clicks that people have to use to get, and use the system. It'll be kind of a single landing page for a hub. You'll know what tab go to, and you can have a lot of information directly on those screens without the screen changing on you. Next, we have the advanced AI capabilities. So obviously, the AI market and the AI world is shifting very fast. What's exciting for Dynamo is that because of the implementation of 3.0, we've been able to embed these AI capabilities directly within it. So whether it's the Dynamo chat, or whether it's the document hub and using data extractions, or creating reports with AI, all of that is fully integrated in the system and will allow users to take advantage of it immediately, and not something that we're kind of trying to piece together in a legacy system. And then last but not least, obviously as we look for the product roadmap, everything pretty much is going to be in 3.0, at least on the front end. As Michelle mentioned, there's back-end changes which aren't affected by 3.0, but we're going to be pushing out new report types. We're going to be pushing out a lot of other functionality, and we want you to be able to take advantage of those immediately once they're released. And so migrating to 3.0 will allow you to do that. Just quickly here, there's a couple of kind of screenshots that will flash. So here's an example, one of the modern looking kind of application, if you haven't seen it. And then also what you're seeing on the left-hand side here are the hub structures. So this is from our fundraising blueprint, and you might have something like a fundraising tab or hub with all of these tabs across the way. And then if you were on the grid here, you might see something like the embedded preview where you would see more or less information as you're kind of going through your day-to-day here. On the next slide, what we're going to have is purposely built tools. So one important thing on 3.0 is that it was built from the ground up through our UI UX team. And one of the things that we've done is purposely built tools like an activity browser, which is more like interacting with notes and emails like you would in like an Outlook experience, and not something like we have in 2.0, which is kind of everything's based on a grid. Additionally, here you'll see the AI capabilities like, the AI summary directly on this page as well. Just kind of goes to how we can embed AI throughout the platform. Next, we have the leveraging new features. So this is an example of a new report that we'll be rolling out soon, 26.2, and it is a Kanban board. So being able to kind of break up visually, once again, not having to use grids everywhere. These are all drag and droppable cards and configurable cards, and this is something that you can only take advantage of if you're on 3.0. And then finally, what we have is just kind of a call out to our blueprints. So here are the 6 blueprints that we have. And, for each of those, we'll talk more about how to get set up on those, either regardless of the migration plan that you want. These will all be the starting point for your migration to 3.0, and you can really leverage all of the out-of-the-box functionality that we've put together. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Kelly Wilkie to start talking about the migration options that we have.
Awesome. Thank you, Phil. So now let's shift into how you can actually approach the 3.0 migration, because there isn't really the same path that will fit all of our existing Dynamo 2.0 clients. So as we've developed our migration strategies based on lessons learned from early adopters over the past few months, we've identified 2 key factors that can help you determine the best path for your organization. So when evaluating your migration approach, we encourage you to consider these 2 questions. What is your team's ability to self-configure? Do you have a person or a team comfortable working in the admin console or willing to learn during the migration process? And then the second question is, what is your willingness to adopt to the Dynamo blueprints? Are you open to moving away from some legacy or duplicate configurations and instead align with Dynamo's best practice blueprint model that Phil just showed us? So the question really is, where does your firm fall between these 2 questions? So based on how you assess these 2 areas, there are 3 migration approaches available. So we have the premium migration, self-service, and then sprint, which is a hybrid model, a newer flexible approach. And we'll take some time to go over these three options in detail. So starting with premium migration, this is best suited for complex or high touch migrations. So it's ideal for clients that have significant existing customizations or those that are looking to restructure, streamline, or really modernize how they're using Dynamo as part of the migration. It's a comprehensive, fully supported delivery model. So it includes a structured project plan, a dedicated Dynamo implementation team, and an extended timeline. So the pricing will vary based on the overall project scope and the level of customization required. This is really tailored implementation approach. The migration is fully customized to your organization's needs. It ensures alignment with your current processes while also incorporating some of the best practices where appropriate. So this is ideal if you're looking for a more guided white glove experience as you migrate to 3.0. The next slide is going to cover the self-service migration option. This is where your firm can control your migration timeline. It's best suited for firms that potentially have strong Dynamo administrator capabilities or teams that are looking to build that expertise throughout the migration process. It leverages the Dynamo blueprints and tools, so you'll utilize the Dynamo blueprints and the available conversion tools to guide configuration and align to some of the best practices that are being rolled out as part of 3.0. It's supported, but it's not led by Dynamo teams. You will have access to weekly migration office hours and the core 3.0 documentation to support your team and your migration as needed. And it's included in your annual subscription. So it's a cost-efficient approach with no additional implementation fees. This approach will work well for your teams that have internal capacity and are comfortable leading their own migration while also aligning to some of the Dynamo standards and best practices included in 3.0. Finally, we will cover the sprint migration. This is a model that we are seeing many clients choose as a practical middle ground between the premium and the self-service. So this is a structured time-bound approach. It's delivered as a 2-week time box migration sprint focused on driving progress quickly and efficiently. It includes professional service support, so up to 12 professional services hours to guide key decisions and accelerate execution. It's a fixed package pricing starting at $3,500, and it's designed for focused, lighter touch migrations. You will leverage best practices with guided support. So it incorporates the Dynamo blueprints, access and assistance to our conversion tools, and access to the weekly migration office hours and core 3.0 documentation. The sprint approach is ideal for firms that fall between premium and self-service. So firms with customized environments that potentially have internal resources to support their migration, or firms willing to adopt the blueprints but without the capacity to execute it independently. The next slide is going to go into the sprint process in a bit more detail, so I will talk through this. So for those considering the sprint approach, the process is designed to be highly structured, efficient, and very collaborative between your team and our team. This slide outlines a sample project plan that will be managed with our new internal project management tool called Guide CX. Many of you will get familiar with it. There's a structured execution through defined checkpoints throughout the sprint to ensure steady progress and alignment. Close collaboration is essential, as this is a highly interactive process between your team and the migration lead here at Dynamo, where we will define clear roles and responsibilities on both sides to keep the momentum going strong. There's clear time-bound deliverables on the client side leading up to go live, which include completing several key online trainings such as Welcome to 3.0, Blueprint Management and Conversion Tools, as well as admin training. And we also request our clients are actively participating in 3 joint working sessions over that 2-week period, making sure that they're providing timely feedback to ensure configurations are refined quickly and progress stays on track. On the Dynamo side, some of the responsibilities include deploying Dynamo 3.0 into your tenant with an initial configuration aligned to your current setup prior to that first walkthrough. So you will log into Dynamo 3.0, you will see the blueprints, but you will also see some customization based on how your current system is configured. Throughout the 2-week sprint, we'll be continuously applying updates based on your feedback, And we will also be enabling your team to independently manage and support configurations going forward. At the end of the 2 weeks, Dynamo 3.0 will be enabled for your user groups. You will gain access to the weekly office hours for ongoing support as you continue your transition to the new interface, and you also have access to that help page as well. Keys to success in the sprint model ultimately depend on strong preparation, clear prioritization, going into that 2 week window. So please ensure you have internal alignment with your teams ahead of time in order to maintain the speed and achieve that smooth go live. Now that you've seen the different migration options available, I'll pass it back to Michelle O'Connell, who will walk through some key migration best practices and reminders.
Great, thanks Kelly and thanks Phil. So now that you've seen a little bit of the different options, what is the experience that we've had working with clients so far? So I do think it's important to make sure that you're positioning the migration to 3.0 as an upgrade. This will be an improvement for many of your end users. Dynamo will look much more intuitive. It'll be easier to use. It's faster. I can say that as a Dynamo user myself. It's definitely faster, which is great. So it's definitely a positive. There will be a little work to get there, but hopefully that's all towards a good end. Think about cleaning up your current tenant and migrating selectively. What that means is, I know that many of you, and looking at the names of who's on this call, have been Dynamo clients for quite some time. So thank you for that. But it does mean that there's likely configuration in your tenant that could be outdated. Your business has changed. Your requirements have changed since then. Let's not bring things over to 3.0 that is just kind of those boxes that you've never unpacked when you moved into that new apartment or house that you have, right? We want to make sure that we're cleaning up what you have today, being mindful about what you're actually using to create a simplified and streamlined experience for your users. So trying to reduce the clutter will be important. We are working really hard at Dynamo to produce and create great content in 3.0 help. It's not just a repeat of 2.0 help. We're trying to add much more recorded content there, more videos, more training. So it will give you a good overview of what 3.0 looks like. For example, one of the questions that many of you might have is, well, how do I know how close I am to the blueprints? I haven't seen the blueprints. There's really good documentation in help about what the standard blueprints look like for each module that you can review and then determine if those blueprints, how close they are to how you're currently using Dynamo within your firm. Make sure that your users are engaged. As Kelly mentioned with the sprints, think about which sprint is going to work best for your firm. We're starting this 2-week sprints on June 22nd. We'll be running them every 2 weeks through the end of the year. So for example, if there's a period in the summer when most of your users or key stakeholders are away on holiday, don't select that time for your sprint. Obviously, that won't be successful if they come back and Dynamo looks completely different. It is important to commit to switching over and going live. You can toggle back and forth between 2.0 and 3.0, but you don't want to do that endlessly. You want to kind of do that just temporarily to make sure that everything important has been brought over and then go ahead and use 3.0 going forward. Why? Well, it doesn't make sense to be using 2 different UIs for a long period of time. For example, if you were to make configuration changes in one, they wouldn't replicate over to the second one, and it could create a confusing experience for your users. After you migrate, you can certainly continue to optimize. As Kelly mentioned, we are setting up a new offering in client services, which is office hours. So we'll be having office hours at least once a week, and we'll certainly look to expand those if the demand is there, to allow clients to join. There's no charge for those, and just simply ask questions with a member of our professional services and potentially product teams. So we'll be sending out information as we start the migrations about how to join those office hours, but that's a great opportunity to get some one-on-one assistance from a member of the professional services team. Things to avoid: don't expect a replica of 2.0. We do want to improve and bring it more future focused. We want to improve upon that. Don't bring over your legacy clutter. We do have conversion tools that will help bring over a lot of your configuration automatically, but not all of it. It's going to be a little bit of work to tweak it, get the visuals to look right, and make sure that everything that we're bringing over is usable for your team. We want to make sure we get your key stakeholders and users to join and be excited about it. So make sure that we're planning for high engagement. And again, just go ahead and move forward with 3.0. You can, as I mentioned, toggle back and forth if needed. So if you were to go live on 3.0 and find that, oh wait, there's one field we only use once a month and we forgot to bring it over, we can always go back to 2.0 until we can get that added to your 3.0 user interface. And as Phil mentioned, you don't want to miss out on any of the 3.0 new capabilities that the product team is releasing every day. So key best practices: get rid of your old fields and views that you no longer need. Adopt the Dynamo blueprints and modify those where needed. So start with those blueprints as a base and then make tweaks based on those rather than kind of designing from scratch. In terms of the removing the old fields and views, I think the example we always use is when you're moving to a new house, you have those boxes you've never unpacked for years, right? Did you add fields in Dynamo when you first implemented that no one's using anymore? Let's go ahead and get rid of them. Was there a view that you saved that isn't really relevant anymore? Let's go ahead and get rid of it. We do have a tool that will bring over all of your views, but we don't want to go ahead and create clutter in 3.0 if we can avoid it. Again, review those blueprints that are in our help section. Donna will send out the link tomorrow when she sends the webinar recap email. You can see those blueprints and documentation about them there and make sure that you can do an assessment of how closely they align to your current Dynamo usage. And then tweak as needed. So there are certain areas of the blueprint, for example, in the due diligence section that's highlighted here, that we think many clients will likely want to make some adjustments to, whether it's something as simple as verbiage or adding their own kind of secret sauce. That's absolutely fine. But thinking about maintaining the general structure of 3.0 with the hubs, the blueprints, and just making the minor tweaks as needed to really kind of target it to exactly to what your firm needs. And then kind of moving forward, some reminders: the 3.0 changes that you're making in the user interface, they do not impact 2.0. There is an article in our 3.0 help section that will tell you how to toggle back and forth between the two. It's just a minor update to the URL, so it's pretty easy to do. So if you are making changes in 3.0, they will not impact your 2.0 users. This means that when you start your migration, you could think about migrating over potentially a test user group. You're not actually rolling 3.0 out to the rest of your users, and just go ahead and kind of play around with the configuration, make the adjustments, and make any changes as needed from there. What can be a little bit tricky is once you've run the conversion tools to migrate over to 3.0, you don't want to continue to make a lot of configuration in 2.0 because that wouldn't get brought over again. So it's just one of those reasons to keep the project moving at a healthy pace to make sure that you're not losing configuration or making your team or our team do that work twice. Dynamo 3.0 can be enabled at the user group level. So you can bring over one user group and leave the rest, as I mentioned. Again, another way to kind of make this a very gradual, slow process. One of the questions I get from clients a lot is, do I have to do this on a staging tenant? We haven't seen the need for that yet. Because the 3.0 migration can be enabled at the user group level, we haven't really seen a need to do this on a staging or UAT tenant. You can do this right on production and just simply not push 3.0 out to your users until you're ready. Our support team is ready to go with 3.0, and as I mentioned, our 3.0 help section is getting better and we're adding content every day. So if you do start your migration and have questions, you can always reach out to them. And as I mentioned as well, we are initiating those weekly office hours, which will help to give you an opportunity to speak to people if you have specific questions. We are reserving in the product team roadmap capacity for any major issues. So if we were to find any defects in 3.0 or any problems that we haven't been able to identify yet, despite our rigorous testing, there is capacity reserved and a full release schedule to be able to get those fixes pushed out as quickly as possible. As I mentioned earlier, many of us at Dynamo use Dynamo every day for our internal systems. So we are kind of the beta testers. We've all been live on 3.0 for many months now and are very happy with the transition, as well as about 35 to 40 active clients using 3.0 today. So one of the questions you're all going to have is what's next, right? Where do I go from here? So the first thing I would encourage you to do is really do some honest self-reflection about what migration option suits your firm. Kelly went through the self-service, the sprint, and the premium. Those are all very different, and really think about what makes the most sense for your firm. A question I've also gotten from other clients is, well, what if I start with the self-service and then I realize I need help? That's okay. That might be a perfectly viable option to start with and see how far you get. And if you find that you do need assistance, then that's something that we can look to either see if you can solve those questions with office hours, or if then you say, you know what, you do want to sign up for a sprint or for a premium migration. Thinking about next steps, it's important to reach out to your account manager, your client success manager, or the support team to enter the migration queue. Migrations start June 22nd. They're running every 2 weeks in the sprint process through the end of the year, and I'm sure we'll have to do some into Q1 of 2027 as well. So think about the 2-week period if you're doing a sprint that would make the most sense for your organization. Thinking about when people are on holiday. When do you have an important investment committee or board meeting where you know that your teams will be tied up focusing on that and don't have time to kind of deal with working on this migration project? So reaching out to your AM CSM is the way to go to help you get into the queue if you want to do a sprint. If you want to do a premium migration, those will not align with the 2-week schedule. We'll basically plan out that project and assess the schedule based on your firm's needs and how much is involved in the 3.0 migration. It'll depend on things like how many modules you use, how customized they are, and then we'll come up with a project timeline that best aligns with your firm. And really think about kind of what are those configuration areas, what are those fields that you need to have, right? What are the ones you use every day? And what are the ones you can get rid of? 3.0 has a really great feature where if you've ever looked at all of the fields available in a Dynamo entity and kind of gotten overwhelmed with just the sheer volume of fields, 3.0 has a great feature where you can actually filter by fields that have data in them, which is a great way to say, okay, I only want to look at the fields that actually have data in them. That might really whittle down that list of all of those fields to something that's much more manageable in terms of review. So that's definitely a feature that will be helpful through the migration process. And then lastly, really think about that migration date and keeping an eye on any other conflicts that you have. As I mentioned, your business calendar would really drive the right time to do the migration. So thinking about holidays, board meetings, things like that that will tie your team up. Really try to avoid those. You can sign up for a sprint several months in advance. So if you know that, let's say the last 2 weeks of August is a great time, perhaps all of your team members are in, but perhaps the pace is a bit slower, you can sign up for a sprint that aligns with your schedule as early as next week, if that makes sense for your organization. Lastly, here's our Dynamo flyer. This is something that you'll see in the GoToMeeting in the handout section. If you want to take a look at it and download and review it now, Donna will also send it out tomorrow with the webinar recap email. This will kind of give you an overview of what we talked about today, the benefits of 3.0, things to think about in terms of the migration checklist before you start and then once you've started, and also what those 3 options are that Kelly highlighted. So if it would make sense to take this, socialize it with other stakeholders at your firm, and talk about next steps. So with that, let me hand things over to Donna, who will moderate our QA session.
Thanks, Michelle. We're going to dive right in here. We have a very, very active audience, so I want to get as many live questions in as possible. We'll start off with the first one that came in pretty early on. Will we have to recreate all of our saved views and custom screen layouts?
Great question. Phil, do you want to take that one?
Sure. No, you don't. I think Michelle mentioned this at one point around some of the conversion tools that we have. So there's going to be the view conversions from 2.0, which will be converted into what we're calling reports in 3.0. There's different iterations of that. So currently, right now, it's a single button that will convert all views for the entire user group. The only thing that it doesn't do right now is create the preview panels. So if you had a view with a grid and then another grid as a preview grid, right now that wouldn't convert. After our next major release in 26.2, it will include the preview panels on the conversion. Then on the layout side, what we're encouraging clients to do is to start with the Dynamo blueprint, because a lot of the layouts that you probably have in 2.0 are already in the blueprint for each module. And so things like an activity grid or layout or a document layout, you might not need to convert what you had in 2.0 because you can adopt that. In situations where you do have kind of a custom layout, such as on the RMS side, you might have a diligence tab that's custom to your own process. There is a conversion tool, and you'll be able to convert those layouts individually or in bulk. And once you do that, basically, you'll click the conversion, it'll go to another section within the admin. You can move around things because in the 3.0 admin, all the panels are drag and droppable. You can relabel things or move them around, and then you can push them to your 3.0 environment.
Thanks, Phil.
Excellent.
Yeah, and one thing to add there is that when you do get the link to the 3.0 help tomorrow, there is an article and help called Conversion Tools. You'll see it highlighted right on the landing page of 3.0 help. That will explain the tools that Phil just mentioned in a little bit more detail. So you can see some examples, see how they work, and also see the instructions to run them if you wanted to try to run them on your own.
Perfect. All right, let's move on to the next one. We understand Dynamo is partnering with Anthropic and will have an MCP connector available by the end of this year, which would allow Claude to interact with our Dynamo data directly. Given that, what would be the key benefit of using Dynamo AI specifically? We're trying to understand whether the two are complementary or whether there is any overlap.
I can take that one. I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. And we had our Dynamo University client conference a couple weeks ago, and this was a hot topic. And honestly, we heard from a range of clients on this. So there's certainly some, I would say categorize them as larger enterprise clients who have kind of gone the route of, creating their own internal AI systems, and they want to connect with the MCP of Dynamo and all of that, which we'll certainly push for in our roadmap before the end of the year. And I think that is, a use case that's valid. There's also a lot of clients who said, we don't have, the ability in-house to create our own AI tools, or, we don't want to, and we want to go with the vendor that provides those AI tools. And so Dynamo will provide a lot of, kind of functionality within the application itself that will also allow clients to do things like have a Dynamo chat where they can answer questions about their data. We'll have a ability to create a natural language query within Dynamo. We'll have, extractions for documents. So regardless of the path that you go down, I don't think there's mutually exclusive either. I think that there's a lot of benefits of having the in-system at your fingertips AI solutions that can be augmented with whatever you're doing outside of Dynamo.
Yeah, Phil, I completely agree. So I use Dynamo every day. Dynamo is our internal CRM, and I can say that I use Dynamo AI. I like the fact that it's in proximity, it's right in the application. So one of the great benefits of Dynamo AI is if you've ever spent time building an advanced search in Dynamo and kind of had to struggle through, you got to relate a bunch of different entities together, and you've got to get the hierarchy right? It takes a little bit of kind of logic to get there, and that might be something that for many of you who are power users is very intuitive, but if you're bringing new users into the system, there's a bit of a learning curve. Dynamo AI really alleviates that. You can go in right away, ask a question. It knows how to kind of cross-analyze entities and relate them to each other. And the fact that you're in the application, you're seeing your screens, your data all right there, kind of naturally allows you to kind of take that initial chat question and involve that into deeper analysis. So I really like the fact that it's embedded in there because I'm right in the middle of the data, interacting with it and doing quick analysis that it would take me a little bit of time to do on my own. So personally, that's my preference, but I think as Phil mentioned, we're open to and available to have both options depending on what each firm requires.
Thanks, Phil and Michelle. Next question. If you love version 2.0 and the configurations you have made, what is the proposed date that version 2.0 will no longer be supported?
If you love 2.0, that's great to hear. But at this point, there's no time on the horizon where we would de-support it. Dynamo tends to be very have a partner focus with our clients, and we tend to be very gradual. For example, things like, we just moved people off the 1.0 portal earlier this year, and that's after we've had 2.0 and 3.0 portals out for several years. So I wouldn't be concerned about anything in the near-term horizon. What I would say is think about what you love about 2.0, and let's figure out how we replicate that in 3.0. I do think that just by nature of 3.0's UI being faster and it being more intuitive for new users, perhaps we can look at kind of a best of both worlds approach where you don't give up anything you love, but you can take advantage of all of the new components of 3.0 that you just won't get in 2.0.
Michelle, since you brought up the portal, a question came in. Does this migration have any impact on the portal?
It does not, no. The 2.0 portal, you can continue to use the 2.0 portal with 3.0, same with WebVision. You can use the 3.0 portal with 3.0. They're absolutely fine. I would say if you are a 2.0 portal user, our 3.0 portal has been out for about 2 years now, where the 3.0 UI is only about 9 months old at this point. So it might make sense to think about an upgrade to Portal 3.0 as part of your 3.0 UI migration. It's not anything urgent you need to do today, but I would try to put it on your 6 or 9 month roadmap, and your account manager can help you navigate that.
Thanks, Michelle. Next question. Could you please explain in more detail how we can assess how closely our version of Dynamo matches the blueprints?
Sure, Phil, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. One is once you have access to the help article, we have articles, I think, on most of the blueprints right now, which kind of explain the core structure and layout of those. The other thing that I would encourage you to do, if you have a CSM or an AM, reach out to them. They can help either give a demo of the blueprint that you'll be moving to so that you can kind of see what that blueprint looks like. And they can also just have a conversation by looking at your existing kind of configuration in 2.0, and together you guys can kind of decide, what's the best approach and how much you'll adopt. The other thing that I'll say is, as part of that sprint migration, which is why we think it's a very compelling offering, is that we're going to look at your existing 2.0 setup initially, and we will actually look at 2.0, see where there's overlap with the blueprint, and kind of set that up for you before you even get going on additional configuration.
Thank you, Phil. Michelle, you have touched on this, but I think it's worth revisiting. Will the migration to version 3.0 be mandatory, or will version 2.0 be supported still? And if so, for how long?
Yeah, the 2.0 will be supported for a long time. I don't have the specific timeline. Dynamo has approximately 1,100 clients globally. We have about 35 to 40 using 3.0 today. So just do the sheer math on that, and you'll realize that it will take time to move our clients over, and obviously to find a time that makes sense given their business schedule and a time that's suitable for them to do the migration. So I would not be concerned right now about being forced to migrate anytime soon. I would think about migrating primarily more on the basis of being allowed to get your hands on all of the new features that we have. There's a lot of new content coming out in 3.0 that I wouldn't want anyone to miss out on long term. So you can keep an eye on the release notes, the what's new, keep an eye on the webinars, on the online help. You can look at the 3.0 help as early as tomorrow once we get that link out, and just kind of see what's there. You can also enable the blueprints in your tenant and just kind of have a look at them. You don't have to push them to anyone. You're not forcing anyone to migrate. There are instructions on how to do that in the 3.0 help section. So if you just want to have a peek at them, you can take a look and then just enable them and kind of get a feel for how steep of a change it would be for your organization. And that's something that's low stakes. There's no real negative impact to doing that. But I do think that you'll see that there is a lot of 3.0 capabilities that will be really compelling. So I would certainly want to think about moving over. I wouldn't force it, but I wouldn't want to wait too long either.
I'll echo everything Michelle just said and add that, we've been clients have been using 3.0 for a while now. I mean, we had early adopter programs that kicked off in Q4 of last year. And I think that with existing clients, and I think that the feedback has been really positive, not only on the feature functionality, but kind of the thoughtful approach to the blueprint itself and how much it helped users navigate the system, search the system, and overall kind of reduce those clicks. So we certainly appreciate and understand that a lot of you have, 2.0 setups that you love. But we really think that there's, benefits of going to 3.0, and we don't see it as so much of, oh, we're moving the cheese too much on people and they'll never be able to pick it up. I think if anything, we've had, heard positive reactions to the ability to search and navigate the system once they move to 3.0.
Thanks, Phil and Michelle. Next question. Has the process for sending mailing campaigns and event setups been modernized or streamlined in the new version?
I know that the answer is yes, but I don't have enough detail to answer that. I don't know if Phil or Kelly, if you do, if not, maybe that's something we could follow up on.
It certainly is. I would say that every single feature that we've brought over from 2.0, including mailing campaigns for sure, and event management is something that's not there yet, but we're in the process of working with the UX team on. But regardless, every feature that we've brought over from 2.0, we didn't want to bring anything over one for one. So even something like the quick search, right? In 2.0, it's a flat list of 10 results and it's kind of, a random order. We looked at that and we said, we worked with our UX designers, we worked with clients like yourselves, how can we improve this? So for instance, in that feature, we did things like, had chips where people can click on entities and filter more for those, or we had the ability to pull in, more than 10 results. So I say that every feature that we're bringing over, we're really looking at it from a ground up and how can we improve it and not just bring it over to check the box.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the advantages of the blueprints, and I probably should have said this earlier, is we have really put a ton of effort into building those blueprints, building on our decades of experience working with clients and our implementation team. For example, one example I give a lot is in our hedge fund team, right? They've literally implemented hundreds and hundreds of hedge funds over the last 25 years. So Janae Haligers, who leads that team, knows many of you all. And Janae really has an eye on all of the requirements her clients have communicated to her over the years, as well as the pain points, right? And the complexity that is mailing campaigns, the multi-step process, the trickiness and the nuances of all the different places to check. So she, for example, has been instrumental in working with our product team around the redesign of mailing campaigns to the communication hub, which is kind of the new name for that feature, which blends a few features together. So we have definitely taken an eye towards what are those pain points, what are those positives, how do we build all that together to make these blueprints really what we think will meet the majority of our clients' needs in a specific vertical, so that going forward, you're not required to kind of build Dynamo from scratch. You're taking the best of what we've done in really the last 25 years and being able to leverage that with a few tweaks and adjustments to meet your particular firm's needs. So I do think that it's a good question, and perhaps as a follow-up webinar, we can talk about Communications Hub specifically and the improvements over the older mailing campaigns functionality, but I can certainly say without a doubt that it's much better.
Thanks, Michelle. And I know we're approaching time, but we're going to continue on with questions here for a bit longer, as most of our audience seems to be sticking around. So I'm going to head back into the queue here. Next question is, can I test the migration on our staging before we go ahead and do it on production?
Kelly, do you want to take that one?
Sure, I can take that one. I think it was mentioned earlier today during the session that it's not a requirement to test in staging, but if you do have a staging environment available to your firm, you certainly can test it there. You can test it by updating the URL to include the text CRM in it, and it will direct you to the Dynamo blueprints and the UI, the 3.0 UI. So you certainly can do that. It's not a requirement. I know we've mentioned a couple times that you can do the migration in production without impacting any sort of data or workflows or automations that you have currently available. But yes, you're more than welcome to use staging just to kind of play around with it and do some test runs.
Just to piggyback off of that question, the next one that I want to address is, are we able to see a demo of what our portal would look like in version 3.0 before we commit to the sprint? Will mail merge be impacted?
I
Okay,
would
so I
say,
think, go
you can
ahead.
go ahead, Michelle.
No,
I
no,
was
no,
going to
you got
say,
it.
yeah, I was going to say, if you do want to see an instance of 3.0 in your portal, I would reach out to your account manager or your client success manager, and they can show you a demo tenant. They're not going to necessarily upgrade your tenant to show you your specific configurations, but they can do some light configurations to show specific functionality.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, the portal and the UI 3.0 upgrades can be done separately. They don't have to be done together. So you could do portal, you could do the UI in two separate schedules, which probably makes sense. You could combine them, but those can be done separately. And I believe all the major mail merge functionality is included in Communications Hub, but I do think based on the questions about that specific areas, we should probably think about doing a follow-up on that with mail merge and mailing campaigns in the Communications Hub.
Thanks, Michelle, and thanks, Kelly. We're going to keep going here. How many hours should be allocated for the 2-week implementation period?
So it really depends. And I know that's not the answer that everyone wants to hear. I know you'd like a finite amount, but if you think about it, it really depends on how many modules you're using, how much you've configured Dynamo. Is it kind of straightforward, or have you done a lot of custom configuration over the years? So if we think about the 2-week sprint, in the 12 hours of professional services, where we see the client work coming in would be to do some prep work before the sprint starts, look at the blueprints, look at your tenant, kind of have a rough idea of sort of what your strategy is around adoption. Once we do the initial conversion, which will leverage the conversion tools that Phil described earlier, you'll want to review the tenant. You'll want to look to see, you want to make some adjustments. What I found in looking at some of the migrations is that everything is brought over, but sometimes the look and feel isn't right, or the order of the field isn't right. So you want to make some adjustments there, most likely. We target 3 workshop calls in those 2 weeks. So between those calls, you'll want to go over your tenant, make a list of things you want changed, discuss those with your project manager or business analyst that you're working with. So that's probably, a little bit of work, depending again on how many Dynamo layouts and modules that you have. And then we do ask you to take some training. We do want to assign some training to the client so that they understand things like, well, what was a view or an advanced search before? Where do I go for that now? What is a hub? What does that mean? Where do I find things? So we want to try to push some of that basic training. It's not terribly time consuming. I think the training time is totally about like 3.5 hours, maybe max. And that's if you do all of it, diligently. So again, I would say it varies, but I would assume however much time it takes you to go through all of your Dynamo screens that you're using kind of thoughtfully, that's really going to be the key driver for how many hours it will take the client.
Thanks, Michelle. Quick question here from one of our audience members. When is the 26.2 release?
So it's June 20th, correct? Is the release weekend?
That's correct.
So that's why we have the sprints scheduled to start on June 22nd. There's a few other improvements in the 26.2 release that make the migration process a bit easier. As Phil mentioned, there are some improvements to the migration scripts with previews. And then also there's the ability to how you clone blueprints, which basically means if you want to take a blueprint and make some minor adjustments to it, that process is more streamlined in 26.2, which is why we have some projects starting now for migrations, but we do think it makes sense to start the bulk of our clients after that release.
Thanks, Michelle. I still see a lot of our audience members being quite active here, so I'm going to ask a couple more questions if that's okay before we do an official wrap up. Is there a list of features not available in version 3.0 yet, and a timeline for everything that will be implemented in version 3.0?
We have all the core features and functionality available, I would say. There's different iterations of those features. So Michelle mentioned, obviously, we've been talking about mailing campaigns, moving into communication hubs. I still think there's probably a couple releases to iron out some of those. What I'll say is more from, or less from a feature by feature standpoint, since we have migrated most of those, or pretty much all of the core features, is that there's a couple of modules, if you fall into one of these, that we would still consider kind of in the more early adopter phase. You can certainly get going with a migration, reach out to us, and it just means that we'll have someone on the product team kind of a little bit more involved as we continue to make them more mature. And those would be Dynamo accounting, PMV, and ESG. There's a couple features in there that we're still kind of, I would say, iterating on more than kind of the core features that are used elsewhere. But outside of that, everything is available. We have net new clients being, implemented on all these modules, and existing clients, already migrating on all these modules as well.
Yeah, everything
Thanks.
Phil said, but I would also add event management as one that's kind of still in the early adopter status.
Yeah, that's a good flag, Michelle.
All right. Where should someone considering the DIY option begin?
So the first thing I would do is spend some time on the 3.0 help site, which the link will go out in our wrap-up email that's targeted to go out tomorrow. You can have a look at the documentation there. There is a great article called Conversion Tools, and that will walk you through step-by-step the conversion process. So I would spend some time looking at that and getting a sense of, do you feel that you have the skill set? Are the concepts in that comfortable for you? If you have someone who's has been an admin user in the past and knows how to do things like add a field, move things around, that's a great start. That means that certainly they're set up for success. So I would really review that documentation, and then coupled with that, just do that self-reflection that Kelly alluded to earlier with the where is my firm in terms of how far from the blueprints we are, and then also how comfortable are we with our kind of self-configuration skills.
Thanks, Michelle and Phil and Kelly, for all of your time and insight today. We still have a number of questions coming through for the Q&A. What we will do is get back to each of you directly. Some of the questions are very much tailored to your particular Dynamo instance, so we want to make sure that we're able to address any questions that you have on a more of a one-to-one basis. I'd like to thank everyone again for joining today's session. Don't forget, in the materials area of GoTo here, that version 3.0 migration checklist that Michelle mentioned earlier is available. Today's session is recorded, and you will receive a link to the recording and playback, along with a copy of today's presentation, along with a link to the Help Center that Michelle has referenced, and the migration checklist as well. That email will be in your inbox around 11 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow morning. So continue to monitor that and feel free to forward it to any of your colleagues as well. We'd also like to continue to invite you to our exclusive Dynamite community on LinkedIn. If you're interested in joining this group where you get access to key information, only available for clients, you can send an email to marketing@dynamosoftware.com, and we will grant you access into that private community on LinkedIn. Again, thank you everyone for attending today's session. We look forward to working with you on your journey to version 3.0. You can reach out to Michelle, Phil, or Kelly via their email addresses here if there's any other particular questions that you may have. Otherwise, you should expect to hear from your account manager as well over the next day or so with any unanswered questions. We appreciate everyone's time and look forward to our continued work together. Thanks again.